disappearance of Danette Latonia Millbrook and Jeanette Latrice Millbrook nearly 34 years ago. 15-year-old African-American twins, Danette and Jeanette Millbrook, vanished off the street near their home in Augusta, Georgia. Despite being one of the few cases of missing twins in American history. On March 18, 1990, Danette and Jeanette Millbrook walked to the local Christ Presbyterian Church on Laney Walker Boulevard. When they returned, they informed their mother, Louise, that a man in a van had followed them for part of their walk. Nothing further is known about this man. Later in the day, the twins walked to their godfather's house to borrow money for a city bus to school the following week, as the teens and their family had recently moved to a new apartment further from their school. After receiving the $20 for bus fare and a little extra for snacks, the teens went to their cousin's house and asked her to walk home with them. The cousin's mother would not allow her to accompany the twins because it would be dark soon. After visiting their cousin, they made a stop at their older sister's home and stayed for approximately 15 minutes. They also requested that their older sister walk with them, but she declined due to recently giving birth. After their disappearance, family members considered it unusual that the twins made multiple requests for company on the walk home that day. Next, they continued on to a local gas station, where they bought chips, candy, and soda. The clerk, Gloria, was familiar with the twins. She did not recall anything out of the ordinary about their behavior. She is the last person to see Danette and Jeanette. Jeanette was last seen wearing a blue pullover shirt over a white turtleneck with a beige skirt, white stockings, and white sneakers. At the time of her disappearance, she stood 5 feet 4 inches and weighed 125 pounds. Danette was last seen wearing a white shirt with an image of Mickey Mouse, white jeans, and black shoes. At the time of her disappearance, she stood 5 feet 6 inches and weighed 130 pounds. Danette has been described as bow-legged. Both girls had pierced ears, shoulder-length hair styled in jerry curls, and they both have a scar near their navels from a surgery shortly after birth. Danette and Jeanette were enrolled as students at Lucy Laney High School. The twins were known to be good teens and were not troublemakers. They did not have a history of running away, and there appears to be no motive for their disappearance. The twins did not have a history of misbehavior, outside of a single instance that occurred as a result of one of the twins being bullied at a bus stop. The family reports that they were told the case was closed when the girls turned 17 because they had reached an age at which they could no longer be legally forced to come home if found. The original investigator claims that he was told by a juvenile case officer that the girls had been found, which led to both the case being closed and the girls' removal from the National Registry of Missing Children. Mistakes in reports from the original investigation, such as misspelling the last name as Millbrooks and listing Jeanette's middle name as Latressa, have remained unchanged in case files and can still be found on associated databases such as the Charlie Project and National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. A Georgia woman says the law enforcement agency that admittedly screwed up the investigation into her twin sister's disappearance is once again causing her family undue heartache. "We are being traumatized all over again," Shanta Sturgis told HuffPost. She said Richmond County Sheriff Richard Roundtree, who in 2013 discovered his agency had mistakenly closed the investigation and lost the case file, has not followed through on a promise he made to her at the time. Roundtree, in an August 2013 interview with HuffPost, acknowledged the case was mistakenly closed just 3 years after it was opened and said no one had looked into it for roughly 20 years. Sturgis said she'd initially thought Roundtree was a godsend. She was 12 when her sisters disappeared and had been fighting since 2004 to get the sheriff's office to look into it. She said she was ecstatic when Roundtree, who was newly appointed in 2013, agreed to do so. Sturgis said that now, along with not hearing from Roundtree, investigators at the sheriff's office won't return her calls. Neither Roundtree or the Criminal Investigation Department responded to a request for comment from HuffPost. Sturgis is not the only one complaining about the sheriff's office. Brooke Hargrove, one of the producers of the Fall Line podcasts, which is intended to raise awareness about the twins' disappearance, said the group hasn't been able to get the sheriff's office to participate in the program. She said an investigator agreed to meet with them after the podcast producers uncovered new leads, but on the condition that they not discuss the case. Roundtree in 2013 said he'd interviewed the original investigator, who had retired, and ran a nationwide search for the twins, which came up negative. Sturgis said she questions whether any of that was actually done. Despite the case being closed in 1991, family members continued to persistently contact the sheriff's department to inquire about the whereabouts of the twins over the years. The family was given several explanations for the closure of the case, including the explanation that the girls had been removed from the home and placed into foster care, where they were eventually adopted. Further investigation revealed this to be false. A close relative did have children in the foster care system, leading the family to believe that this was the source of the confusion. These calls ultimately led to the case being reopened in 2013. In media releases, the sheriff was quoted as saying, "We think a terrible injustice has been done for the last 20 years, which helped to fuel interest in the new investigation." The current investigating agency is the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. Although in 2017 the Sheriff's Office met with the Willbrook family to discuss the case and collect familial DNA samples, as of 2019 it is unclear if the case is continuing to be investigated by local law enforcement. The producers of the podcast The Fall Line have taken an active role in the search for Danette and Jeanette, and helped raise a $10,000 reward. A meeting with the Sheriff's Department led the Willbrook family to believe the reward would be officially announced and matched by the Sheriff's Department, but the Sheriff's Department denies making this commitment, concerned about the lack of publicity for the reward. The producers of the Fall Line and Unresolved podcasts worked together to raise money for a billboard to advertise the reward fund. As of March 2018, a little over $2,500 was raised and plans were in motion to create the billboard. Skeletal remains of an unidentified black female were found in Aiken County on January 25, 1993, and were believed to be the result of a homicide occurring sometime between 1990 and 1992. The remains were found near Shores Creek off of Highway 191 in Aiken County, South Carolina. This woman remains unidentified and has become known as one of the Aiken County Jane Does. The family strongly believes that facial reconstructions of these remains resemble and could be Jeanette. When the remains were originally found, the family was told that it was not either of the twins. However, the family was not given a reason why. As of August 2017, the coroner's office reportedly has plans to compare DNA from the Aiken County Jane Doe to familial DNA. After the analysis, it was discovered that the skeletal remains found did not belong to the twins. Joseph Patrick Washington was active in the girls' neighborhood, and some believe that he may have been involved in the girls' disappearance. So far, the stories and investigations about the case have talked of the same old leads. The girls had seen a white van follow them home from church the day they had disappeared. The van or the man in it was never identified or tracked down. In the same area that the girls went missing from or were taken away lived a serial killer by the name of Joseph Patrick Washington. He lived in Hale Street near the pump and shop where the girls were last seen and would be seen on the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. He was actively attacking women in the early 1990s, around the same time that the girls went missing. He's known to have killed 2 women, possibly 3, and was arrested in 1993 and died in 1999. He was known to pick up women at gunpoint, take them to another location, sexually assault and sometimes murder them. He preferred African American women with short hair. Both twins had short hair. However, because he was arrested in 1993, by when the twins were already declared runaways and the case was closed, they never connected it to Washington. The twins' mother is Mary Louise Sturgis. She has been very involved in trying to find her daughters. Their father, John Willbrook, passed away in 2021 and spent the last few years of his life living in a nursing home while suffering from dementia. However, he had expressed no desire to look for his daughters. Sister to the twins, Shanta Sturgis, has also become a vocal advocate in the search for her sisters. Persistent calls to the Sheriff's Department from Shanta prompted the case to be reopened in 2013. Shanta has been very critical of both the initial and current investigations. Danette and Jeanette have 8 siblings. This caused some confusion after their disappearance, as their sister was often mistaken as one of the twins. John Willbrook is the father of Danette and Jeanette Willbrook, who vanished off the street near their home in Augusta, Georgia in 1990. Despite being one of the few cases of missing twins in American history, their disappearance gained little media attention and many question whether it was properly investigated. Even their own father seemed barely interested in finding them, according to the family. Could Willbrook know what happened to the twins? According to one man's allegations, yes. An incarcerated man named Ernest Vaughn suggested that John Willbrook knows that his daughters are dead and realized that he went crazy because of it. Mostly how the serial killer Joseph Patrick Washington had some ties to the girl's father, John Willbrook. John Willbrook has been linked to crimes in Richmond County dating back to the 90s. First investigation shed light on Washington, a convicted killer charged with murders, kidnapping, and sexual assaults on black women in the 90s. He died in prison in 1999. He was sentenced to at least 17 consecutive life sentences for his crimes while waiting on a death penalty case to proceed. Washington died before that case was prosecuted. It's unclear if his own affiliations played any role in the disappearance of his daughters. The day her daughters vanished, she confided in her ex, John. At the time, she didn't think much of his response. While that response seemed ambiguous at that time, now his responses are even more unclear. John is in a nursing home with dementia. Both Sturgis and police say they can't get clear answers out of him. If hindsight is 20/20, the brush of history strokes even more clarity. Years after the twins went missing, John's alleged criminal behavior caught up to him. He pleaded guilty for concealing a murder Ernest Vaughns was convicted of. While that case has no connection to the missing Millbrook sisters, it does intertwine a community. Vaughns claims he, the twins, and few others were at John's house partying the day of the disappearance. He alleged an argument happened and he thinks the twins were taken from house, killed, and dumped in the Brickyard Pond area. Based on the information they got, it was from the person whose information turned out to not be credible. Adding, the Brickyard is such a vast area they'd need a specific location to narrow down the search. The sheriff says they never got a specific location and that tipster, Vaughns, was not credible. Remember, the twins left home 3 times on March 16, 1990. The connection could be between the second and third. In part 1 of our cold case investigation, the family told us the twins mentioned a white van following them on their way back home from buying food at Church's Chicken on Milledgeville Road. Back then, Sturgis says when she looked out the door once the twins made it inside the home, there was no white van. We don't know if Washington had anything to do with the white van spotted in the area. But we do know, based on district attorney files reviewed by the I-team, he had different cars, different tools, and different weapons he used during kidnappings, murders, and sexual assaults. But almost 34 years later, despite the deep dive in Oxygen's The Disappearance of the Millbrook Twins, in which they examine the inexplicable behavior of the girl's father, John Millbrook, who wouldn't give a DNA sample when the case was reopened in 2013 and told his oldest daughter, who's since passed away, not to provide one either, she did anyway. And despite the justified outrage over the entrenched bias of a law enforcement system that initially dismissed Jeanette and Danette as probable runaways, not to mention media outlets that gave them short shrift because the family isn't affluent and white, that doesn't change the fact that the girl's fate remains unknown. I pray and I'm still hoping, Mary told Augusta said. I ain't going to give up on them. But every time you think you got somebody to help, and you think you take a step forward, you got to take a step back. I don't think they think my children were important enough to go out and look for. Shanta, who maintains a Facebook page dedicated to keeping Jeanette and Danette's names out there, added, they are my sisters, but they are her daughters, you know. When you birth 2 kids at the same time, and then they grow up to 15 years old and now they are 45 years old and you haven't seen them since they were 15, that's hard. Really hard. The Millbrook twins, Danette and Jeanette, disappeared from Augusta, Georgia on March 18, 1990. They were 15 years old at the time. The case is one of the few missing twin cases in American history, but it was not investigated thoroughly and is not well known outside of the area. The Millbrook twins vanished without a trace.